Hey there, welcome to today's episode. We've got a new toy in the studio today. I'm pretty excited. It is the Chroma Console from Hologram Electronics. Now I've decided to split this into two parts, this being part one. And in this part, we'll unbox the device, take a look around it. We'll plug it in, run some basic sounds through there so you get just an idea of how this thing works. And then in part two, we'll dive a little bit deeper, go further into some of the effects and the settings, and a couple of specific scenarios in terms of running some drums through it, some other sounds. Now for full disclosure, I reached out to Hologram Electronics and asked if they wouldn't mind sending one of these over so that I could test it out, do a little bit of a review, and potentially some tutorial videos as well. Kindly they agreed, but no money has changed hands and I'm under no obligation to give you anything other than an honest review. Now this comes at the perfect timing, and the reason I reached out to Hologram was because at the moment with my current workflow, I've kind of explored a lot of samplers. There's been a lot of samplers and sampling on the channel, and that's great up until a point, but what I've discovered is I'm more interested in manipulating those samples in different ways. A big reason for that, of course, is copyright. If you take a well-known sample, use it in any of your music, you're going to get in trouble straight away. And what you can do is you can use sound design, more effects, and different types of gear to kind of navigate around that and come up with more original sounds. Now, I'd seen this piece of gear being used by some other beat makers, thought it looked really good and it sounds great, and so I was really excited to get my hands on one, and we can take a look at this thing in all its glory. All right, let's open up the box and see what's in here. It's really well packaged, plenty of padding on this thing, but of course they get shipped around the world. Looks like under here we've got our power supply and a USB cable, so let's take those out. So we've got a USB to USB-C cable. We've also got the power supply, and I'm assuming depending on where you are in the world, it's the type of adapter they'll send you for the power supply. This is a 3-pin UK plug. Next up, we got the main unit, so let's pull this thing out of here. It's a nice compact little thing. Heavy enough though, it's got a metal construction by the looks of things, which I always like to see. It's better than plastic. You also get this little bit of card on top that's giving you some idea of the basic functions for these switches. We're just going to take that off for now, take it out the way. Now everyone's going to have their opinion on what they think looks good. I really like the look of this thing. I like the rainbow colors. It's giving me kind of old Commodore 64 vibes. And overall, I have to say, with the metal construction and these solid knobs, everything feels pretty robust. Now, if we just put this down out of the way for a second, we'll take a look what else is in the box. You get a nice trippy hologram sticker. We've got a nice little paper quick start guide. And I have to say, this is a nice surprise, a proper printed manual. You don't see these very much these days. Most stuff is online. But when you're trying to learn something, it is really cool to just have a paper manual next to you. I think that's why people sell them on eBay. Okay, so the unit itself, as I've already mentioned, metal construction, like a little textured finish on this, which I think is nice. We've got these 8 encoders across the top, which feel pretty solid. We've got 2 buttons here. Don't forget this can be used as an effects pedal, so it can be something that can be on the floor. I'll be using it with my fingers because it's something I'm going to run through samplers. But of course, if you've got a guitar, some other kind of instrument, and you want to use it as a foot pedal, you've got these nice hefty little switches on the front. Not a lot to report on the front of the unit. Underneath is the same. Now on the back of the device, we've got a 9-volt power supply socket, USB, which you can send MIDI over, I believe, 2 dedicated actual MIDI ports, which is a surprise. This socket here, which I'm assuming is for an extra pedal, like an external pedal, and something else you don't see very often with these, stereo inputs and outputs, which is really cool. All 1/4-inch jacks, so proper jacks, and it just generally feels like a solid quality little bit of kit. You got these buttons on here, all feel nice enough. Of course, what we need to do next is plug it in and see what this thing sounds like. Okay, we've got it set up and plugged in on the desk. Couple of things. The first thing to mention is there doesn't seem to be a dedicated on or off switch. I'm not sure if you have this in bypass mode, so if we click it here like this, we are bypassing everything. I'm not sure if that's kind of like it being off. By default, when I just put the power to this thing, it lit up blue, so I'm assuming it just turned itself on. It's not really a big deal. I just was kind of expecting to see a power switch somewhere. The other thing that I will say is that it's a little bit slidey. It could maybe benefit from some rubber feet, which of course you could buy some just cheap stick-on rubber feet, but it might be nice if it came with those, mainly because when you're on a desk like this, and if you're going to use it like me, it's going to be more on the desk than it is on the floor. It does have a tendency to be quite slippy. You can see it's very easy to kind of move around. A couple of little rubber feet though would solve that problem. Let's take a quick look at the basic controls. So when you tap this button here, you get your bypass. It turns the effect on or off if you do a quick tap of the right hand side. If you long press this, it goes into preset mode where you can select different presets. All of this will go into more detail in part 2. Now if you move over to the left, you have this tap button, so you can tap this and tap in your tempo. So of course, if you're working to 70 BPM and you want your delay, some of these effects to be somewhat in sync to what you're working on, you can use this to tap the tempo. Now with this left hand side as well, if you do a long press, that is how you start audio looping, I believe, according to the manual. So this little box has an audio looper, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can also use it to record parameter changes, so you can do things kind of in real time. Again, part 2 will explore some of that a little bit further. Up above, we have our list of effects, so it's it's very simple. For each of these channels, you have a type of effect. So this red channel is for your character, yellow is for the movement, green is for diffusion, and blue is for texture. Just above this, you'll notice there are 4 switches, which are all currently turned off. If you want to turn on one of these effects, you just press one of these switches. Now they are color coded, so for character, you've got drive, sweeten, fuzz, howl, and swell. If you press the switch, the first one is red, of course, corresponding to drive, and if you go through, yellow will be sweeten, green is fuzz, howl is blue, and of course swell will be purple, and it's the same for all of those channels. So that's how you select the individual effects. Now to my knowledge, you can't stack effects from the same channel, but you do move through all of these effects in a chain. I'm assuming by default we go from character to movement to diffusion to texture, but you can change the order of those, and again in part 2 we'll look at how you do that. Now up above we've got our encoders. You'll notice if you look carefully we have some bigger, bolder text and then some smaller writing underneath some finer text. That means that there are multiple different parameters per encoder, so by default you are changing the amount for all of these bottom encoders. For the top set here we've got our tilt, our rate, and our timing, and I believe if you press A and B together you go into secondary mode where you can then change the other parameters written in the finer text. So for the top, for the red channel, we have sensitivity. For yellow, we have drift. For green is also drift. Blue doesn't have anything at the top here, but the gray master output changes the output level. So by default, it's mix. And if you go to the secondary, you're changing the output level. All of these bottom encoders, you change from amount, which is the default, into secondary, where you're changing the effect volume. Now, you'll also notice if you look carefully here, we have a little menu that tells you the buttons that you're going to press in order to access the different menu options. So secondary is these 2. We have gesture, which is these 2. We have effect setup, which would be these 2. And then copy and save. You can do these 2 here. I believe you can save up to 80 user presets. So there are some built-in presets you can select, but you can save 80 of your own custom presets, which is really cool. We're just going to press A and B again to come out of this mode. And what we'll do, we'll start with the character channel and take a listen to how that's actually going to change our sound. Now, in order to demo this, we need something to send through this little effects box. Could be samples, could be instruments, it could be anything. That's what I really like about it, particularly with the stereo input and output. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using a synth app because I just want something with a very basic tone. We've got this E piano inside of this application. I'll just do a C note. It's really basic and plain, no effects turned on here, so everything that we have coming through, any effects that are applied, are from this little box itself. We're going to be starting with the red channel, so the character, and of course what we do is we press this switch once to turn it on. We want to make sure our mix is set all the way over to the right for this particular demo. Now mix of course can be changed, so you can apply just a certain amount of the effect, but I want it all the way to a wet signal, so it's all the way to the right. We're going to set this to drive, which is our first effect. It lights up red to match the drive effect. And then what we can do is just play this note and start cranking up some of these effects. We'll start with the amount button on drive. So this is our plain signal. You get the idea, pretty nice. Little bit of saturation there, something like that, almost distortion, not quite, I'd say more kind of saturated sort of sound. Above is our tilt. Now this applies dark or bright, so I'm assuming like an EQ, like a little bit of a filter, it's either going to be slightly more of a darker tone or a brighter tone. We'll try that now. We'll leave this cranked all the way to the right. Yeah, exactly what I would expect. Now underneath for this red channel, you can change the sensitivity if you go into the secondary, and you can also change the effect volume. We won't look at that in today's episode. Maybe we'll do that in part 2. But generally, I'm assuming it's just going to change the volume of the effect. You want it to be a little bit louder. Maybe it's slightly more aggressive. I'm not 100% sure till I try it. And then sensitivity, of course, is going to be changing the sensitivity for the tilting option, which I don't think we need to cover just now. Let's just keep moving on with the basic stuff. I'm quickly going to dial the knob all the way back to the left so that we can move down. We'll select the next one, which is sweeten, and of course our switch turns yellow so we know which one we're playing around with. And let's see what sweeten sounds like. So that one's quite interesting. It's pretty subtle. It sounds like it's maybe filtering a little bit as it's kind of moving through. there's an increase in gain, but it's not something that kind of bites you on the nose as to what it's doing. Now, that might depend on the type of sound that you're running through the box, but we'll come back and take a look at that in closer detail in part 2. Again, I'm going to move this all the way back to the left, same with this one, so we can try some fuzz. I'm assuming a fuzzy distortion type effect. Yeah, doesn't disappoint. That's exactly what you get. Let's move this back to the left and go down to howl, which is blue. Yeah, it's a really nice sounding effect. Of course, if you're a guitar player, you're going to really enjoy this kind of thing. But I do think it's going to be great to just run samples through drums, all of that kind of stuff. Just see what weird sounds we can come up with. One more time, move this back to the left, and we'll move over to swell, which is our purple effect, and we'll dial that in. Okay, so with swell, it sounds like it's putting an attack onto that sound. If you listen to it, it puts like a bit of a sort of fade into it, so I guess that's where the kind of swelling effect comes from. You can kind of hear it softening the blow as that sample comes through. I dare say with the right input signal and maybe a combination of these effects, you're going to be able to get some pretty wild results. All right, let's take a look at the movement channel. Again, we'll just keep the most basic parameters. We won't deep dive here, but just so that you got some idea of what each of these effects sounds like. We'll start with the first one, which is our doubler effect. You can see it lights up red. Now, this one is blinking. I'm not sure if that's telling us the tempo. I'll let you know in part 2. I've only just noticed that blinking like that. That might be the rate, might be the tempo that is currently set. If we take our note and we just start at the bottom, we'll go with the doubler and we'll crank up the amount first. And we'll play with the rate. Pretty cool effect where you're getting all of that kind of pitch shifting, kind of wobbly sort of style. Now we'll try out the vibrato, so we'll move down to the yellow where we've got our vibrato, and we'll dial this back and do the same thing. So pretty subtle when you just use the amount. Let's try the rate. Yeah, there you go. I think what I'm discovering with this as well is that small movements of these encoders can kind of create like a big difference. Let's move down to green, which is our phaser. So of course we're expecting a phasing effect. And I just want to go into the secondary because I want to see what happens if we change the rate. So I'm using A and B, and I'm going to play around with this rate. So you can see it gives us some information here. Let's just set it in the middle. Yeah, some pretty interesting effects going on. Let's go to tremolo, which is the next one down. That is blue. You can see it here. We'll dial it up with the amount. And let's change the rate. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's acting like a gate. If you crank that right up, it starts to stutter, which I think is a pretty cool effect. The last one we've got here is pitch, so let's select that where we've got our purple light. Again, we'll dial up the amount first. So it feels like that one is a dry and wet mix when you're talking about the pitch. It's either the entire pitch signal or it's a combination of the two if you've got it mixed. All the way to the left is just without any pitch change. Yeah, or all pitched. And then our rate, I'm assuming, is going to change the pitch amount. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. Okay, on to the green channel, which is our diffusion channel. We're going to start with cascade, so we're going to turn that on to red. And as always, we're just going to start by dialing up the amount, and then we'll take a look at timing for this one. So we've moved on from rate to timing for the green channel. It's kind of interesting. Let's dial up the timing. Oh. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I really like that one. Now let's look at reels. We'll dial this down, move to reels, which is yellow. Almost sounds like a feedback at the end of that, if you really crank it up. Let's try the timing. Yeah, that's super cool. Now, don't get me wrong, I've liked all of the effects so far. Character's been great, there was some good stuff in movement, but Diffusion, this kind of green channel, where we're starting to get these kind of trippy effects, really kind of floats my boat, certainly put a smile on my face. Let's go to space, which I've got to assume is like a reverb. It's pretty subtle with just the amount. Let's dial up the timing. Yeah, that's really cool. Definitely sounds like a reverb type of effect. It's opening things up, quite spacey, as the name suggests. The next one is collage, so let's move down. Of course, this one is blue. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Sounds like a kind of stuttering effect. We'll keep the amount up. Let's just try the timing. Oh. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I really like that. I'm not exactly sure what that's doing. I'll have to go into the manual further to look, but it's a great sound. The next one on this channel is purple, which is reverse, so I'm assuming it's going to start reversing the playback of the signal. And that one again there sounds like it's a mix, so when you're playing with the amount, you're mixing between sort of dry and wet, and then the timing seems to be changing the pitch of that reverse signal. Again, pretty cool. And finally, that leads us on to our blue channel, which is the texture channel. No secondary encoder here. This one is for the mix and output level, but we'll crank up the amount and see what each of these does. We're going to be starting with red, which is the filter. Now, I had a quick peek at the manual, but when I get something new like this, I kind of just want to dive in and see how intuitive it is straight out of the box. One thing I did notice in the manual, though, was that for texture and where we have filter, which is red, you have a couple of different types of filters that you can set up. You can set it up to be a low pass or a high pass, and I think maybe a tilting filter as well. We'll use the sound again and try it out. So yeah, in this mode, like a basic low pass filter. If we move down one, we get to squash, which is yellow. Now again, with this one, it feels a little bit like it's adding some saturation, some color overall. Maybe it's compressing the sound a little bit, bringing the volume level up, but I'm assuming in conjunction with some of the other effects, that's going to sound pretty nice. If we move down to number 3, which is green, it is cassette, so a cassette type of effect, I assume. Yeah, and we're getting that kind of lo-fi feel to it. It starts getting a little bit wobbly. Yeah, really nice. The fourth one is blue, and that is broken. Bit of a weird wobbly sound to that. Does kind of sound broken, sounds like a machine kind of malfunctioning. The final one is purple, which is interference, and we'll dial back the amount and just try this out. Yeah, pretty interesting. It does sound like interference, radio interference, kind of stuttery. just kind of breaking up that signal. Now, as I said, we'll do a part 2 where we deep dive. I'm going to spend more time with the manual, learn this thing inside and out because it's a hell of a lot of fun, but it does a lot despite its size. And rather than making one very long video, I thought we could just split it into a few parts. The first one today, of course, just so that we can take a look at the unit itself and listen to some of the basic effect channels, what it does to the sound as you run a very simple signal through it. To finish off, what I want to do is just apply multiple different effects at the same time, just to give you some idea of the results that you could achieve. Of course, we're going to stay with the same piano sound. So this is our dry signal. Let's turn the mix all the way up and let's start programming this thing in with some sounds that we want. So we'll start with character. Let's maybe add a little drive. So we'll go to the first one. We'll watch our output volume. Then let's go to movement and we'll add a little vibrato. Let's go to number 2. Yeah, pretty cool. With diffusion, let's turn that on and let's go to space, I think, with number 3. And finally, let's add some texture with blue. So we'll go to cassette, I think, for this one. Yeah, just sounds really, really nice. It certainly gives life to digital signals, something just coming from an iPad, a very basic synth, and all of a sudden it's got this kind of analog edge to it. I'm really looking forward to exploring putting drum sounds and things through here, seeing if you can just kind of scuzzy everything up. And let's not forget, this is with everything cranked up. If you just want something that's very subtle, we can use our mix to dial this in. So if we move all the way to the left, we'll just dial that in slowly till we get the full effect. And so I'm going to leave it there. First impressions, I am very impressed with it. I think the sound quality of it is great. I think it's going to play really well with a lot of other gear in the studio. Really excited to put samples through it, maybe even chain to multiple pieces of gear. I've just got a Sonicware Texture Lab that kind of manipulates samples and does some granular synthesis. I think having that then running through this, we could just come up with some really, really interesting sounds. In part 2, we're going to deep dive a little further. We'll take a look at how you can reorder these channels. You'll be able to use the looper. I believe you can automate the parameters and how you can call up things like your preset, stuff like that. Anyway, take care and I'll see you guys in the next episode.